Welcome to the Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm joined, as always, by my good buddy and co-host Brian Gill. And we are very excited today to host a friend of a friend in the fly fishing community and in the community of men's ministry and work with families. Jon Hagedorn. Since '97, Jon has worked professionally in the outdoor recreation industry. He has a degree in outdoor research and leadership from Western Washington University and has logged thousands of miles on rivers throughout the Northwest as both a whitewater and fishing guide and instructor. As much as those trips and activities themselves, Jon enjoys building relationships and memories with others, especially families. Jon and his beautiful wife, Julie, currently live in Leavenworth, Washington with their 2 sons. He's the founder of Family Lines, which I'm excited to hear more about, husband to Julie, father to 2 sons. He's a level 4 raft instructor, fish whisperer, which I'm going to need some of that information, and a Pass the Pigs pro, which I hope we talk about some more later. But thanks so much for joining us, Jon, man.
Brad, I'm honored to be here. You too, Brian. And Fish Whisperer, that was written by a buddy of mine. So I don't claim. I think that's dangerous to claim anything guaranteed when you're fishing.
So let the record show that that's not a self-proclamation, but a moniker given
Correct.
to you by.
Let the actions speak for themselves. That's the best way with fish.
If it's like the way that I whisper to fish, they usually don't hear me, and so.
Well, there you go. There is.
So I too am a fish whisperer.
Right.
Yeah.
And different fish speak different languages.
Right.
They hear that whisper a little different. So.
That's good.
So, Jon, thank you so much for joining us, man. And I'm so excited about this topic that we're going to be talking about today. The family is such an important part of my life. Brad and I both have strong families, and grew up with families that father was very important to us, and so this idea of what your kind of focus is and bringing the outdoors into this whole conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about Family Lines and what that is, and just give us a rundown?
Yeah, well, I'll back up a step and just give you guys a little background and how and why I started it, because that just paints that backdrop. But in the early 2000s, I started guiding with the Wilderness Youth Ministry. So we would work with a couple thousand kids a year, and I was primarily focused on the river. We do backpacking and some mountaineering and climbing stuff, and my realm was largely river. And so a lot of times alongside the river with a lot of kids and hearing a lot of stories, we would focus good amounts of time on hearing their what we call their defining moments. So if you're out there with a young man or a young woman, for example, what are 3 of your most defining moments that have made you the young man or young woman you are?
Oh, love that.
And so many of those had to revolve around family, and especially dad. And as you guys know, I mean, as a dad, you don't do it perfect, right? I always remind my boys and any of the dads I'm talking with, hey, first time through, never been here before. I have Julie and I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm not writing any books on how to parent teenagers right now. I'm just, but I've never raised an 18-year-old or a 14-year-old. Each son, even if we have 2 boys, even if you've been through those ages with one son, the next one's so unique, so different.
Right.
But my dad didn't do it perfect, but he was there and loved me unconditionally. And I just grew up knowing that there's nothing I was going to do that would ever change, or not do, that would ever change my dad's love for me. And that no matter how much I screwed up, I always had a place to come back to if that were the case. And I feel, and I know that role as a father is to represent our Heavenly Father's love to our kids. And so I'm listening to these kids share these stories, and I'm thinking to myself, I love being out here, but I'm not your dad. And we may have some really significant conversations here, but you still have to go home and live it out. And a lot of times that support structure either isn't there, or even if it is intact, you're not hearing and saying the same things. You're now trying to relay to your mom or dad, hey, this is a cool, impactful moment I had, and this is what we talked about, if you even bring that up at all. So all that to say, it just led me to think more and more about how do I, if we can have these same settings, bring fathers, especially being a dad and a man, obviously I gravitated toward dads. It's not at all that we dismiss the necessity and the significance of mothers as well, but
right.
A lot of times that relational disconnect, especially is with the dad. So if we can bring a dad and his son or his daughter or grandson, granddaughter out and into God's creation, where you're surrounded by him speaking through his beauty, everything that draws you guys in your heart, and a lot of what the podcast centers around is just, you can't help but be captured and see the undeniable smallness of you and bigness of what's around you. And so being out there with your creator, having time to talk about the things that matter in life, that we miss in the daily. And if you can have those same conversations with your dad, so what if your dad could hear those defining moments in your own words? What if you could hear his? Dad, what are the three, as a part of my journey with my own dad, even though he was a fantastic dad, I grew up through my teenage years not really knowing, Dad, what was this like for you? And sometimes I think a lot of teenage guys want to hear that. They just don't know how to ask it, or maybe don't even know that they want to ask it.
That's right. Dad
doesn't think they want to hear it or doesn't know how to share it. So one of my greatest privileges is being an awkward question asker on behalf of Dad. It's we're not going to force conversation to go somewhere where they don't want to go in a negative way. But if I can open up an opportunity, could be as simple as, Dad, share one of the moments you felt most connected with your son. And why was that a favorite moment for you? And vice versa. It could be, if you had a do-over again in the treatment of your dad, what would that be and why? Which is a very powerful question, especially with sons in the 30s and 40s. Is there anything we need to say we're sorry for? And you give them time to go off and do that, or center conversation around things that are going to invite that healing, that next step of healing in their family, and see that impact their family line. And just give them space for that, give them permission for that, facilitate that, and then surround them with a group of dads that are commonly pressing into that. So you're invited in the company of men to really press into what matters most with our kids collectively, and be reminded, okay, I'm not the only one that messed up like that or struggles with that or doesn't know how to do this, or so that's a long answer to your short question, but that's a lot of the heart behind Family Lines and what got it started.
What is it taking? What's the context in which this is taking place? Is this a retreat, a fishing trip, a camping adventure? What are we talking about when you're getting these men and son together?
Yeah. So it started like anything, God puts something in your hand and you open it up to give it away. And what I had at that time was a raft and a love for fishing, some rod building stuff in my house. And I had, through this wilderness ministry I worked for prior, I had built a lot of rods with dads and kids, built their fly rods with them, taking them out fishing to catch that fish on the rod they built, tied flies with them. We would go out on these river trips, but they'd want to learn fly fishing on the side, because we didn't really book fly fishing trips through the wilderness ministry I was guiding with. It was all rafting trips, whitewater trips, but you get some time on the beach. So I always saw fishing as it's not the only activity we know out there, but it's such a great one for inviting multi-generational interaction. So grandpa can often go with dad and grandchild, and it's not limited to age or ability. I mean, there's always ways you can get people down to the water, regardless of physical disability for the most part. And then it's quiet enough to invite conversation, but you're also doing something. So you're not just
that's so good,
staring awkwardly at each other, wondering what we're going to talk about. I mean, you can literally be shoulder to shoulder, and that's what we really enjoy, is that shoulder to shoulder interaction. You're standing in a boat casting together, and you don't even have to look at each other if it's a little more comfortable that way, but you can still talk about significant things, So we do a lot around fishing. That's our primary platform of connection. We offer rod building workshops, fly tying workshops. We do single day trips and then multi-day trips. A lot of our single day trips are in Washington State here, specifically North Central Washington. We have a fly fishing academy that we started a few years ago that does a lot of intro fly fishing lessons and single day trips and things. But a lot of the funding that comes through that academy goes to support the overall ministry too. And a lot of that takes place in our expeditions. So we'll do every year we do a 7-day kayak trip in Southeast Oregon, and we do a 5-day steelhead fishing trip in Southeast Washington. We go to Alaska, Montana this year. And so we have different expeditions. We'll invite dads on with their kids, but the biggest reach comes through our documentary work. So it was probably, I don't know, around 2015, 16, we started asking Aaron Bryant, my buddy, who we worked together, and he came, we started Family Lines. I started it in 2010. Aaron came on in 2013. We've been working together ever since. A really good friend, very talented filmmaker. And
no doubt. That's the part I'm most familiar with is having taken some guys through the video series that you guys have on Right Now Media.
Yeah.
And man, those things are incredible. They look amazing.
Yeah. Aaron and Jared Harrison. Jared's the other buddy that we all three are on core staff of Family Lines together, and they do some amazing work in capturing and telling the story. But Aaron and I we've guided a lot together over the years. He was also with the Wilderness Youth Ministry I was prior. And we started asking, how do we take these same campfire moments, these campfire conversations that we're hearing, that we're only getting with a select number of guys once a year, and share that, because every guy needs to hear what this man just shared, or every dad needs to be reminded of what this man just shared. And so then we started documenting those. We started doing a trip a year where we invited a core group of guys specifically that were willing to share their story. And it usually revolves around a theme. This latest one that we just released on Right Now Media, you mentioned, Brad, is called Cycle Breakers. And we were looking for guys that had a past cycle in their family that they wanted to break when it came to fatherhood and do it different for their kids moving forward. Mm-hmm. This next one that we'll release this upcoming year is a father-daughter focus as well. So we're trying to look at the different ages, the different dynamics, the stories that need to be told, similar to what you guys are doing with this podcast. And then I think there's coming up to around 400 facilitators that are all around the country, a couple other countries as well, which the numbers to us, that's fun to see growth, but not just for growth's sake, right? It's the number is exciting because that's a lot of dads.
Yeah.
So there's dads out there we'll never even meet that have grabbed onto this series, and they're courageous enough to lead these other groups of fathers. And it's awesome because it just motivates you to capture so many more stories and move them out. And so that, Brian, is one of the largest ways we involve people right now in Family Lines, is just getting to hear those stories and it's the power of testimony. It really, me and my boys walked through some significant loss in the past. And when things, I had my late wife, Erin, passed away a handful of years ago. And when that happened, I didn't want to hear a sermon. I'd had enough of sermons growing up in the church, and sermons are great. No, but I didn't want to hear about God or another topic about God. I wanted to know, how are you going to walk us through this season? Mm-hmm. And I'm talking to my Heavenly Father, and I want to know. And a lot of that for me came from those that were willing to share their testimony. And I think of Revelation 12, when we're reminded that enemies cast down and defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And there's something about testimony. You can't argue it like a teaching topic. It's, hey, I'm here by the fire sharing with you in one of the darkest seasons of my life, that there is absolutely a Heavenly Father that is willing to take your hand and be that rescuer and restorer and healer and redeemer, and everything. All these words that we read about really are true. And this is how he's done it for me. And this is why I know he wants to do that for you. And that's what I wanted to hear, those that had walked the common road. And that's what we're trying to do as well with Family Lines. And a lot of what we're just giving time for is story, kids to share their stories, and fathers and grandfathers to share their stories.
That's so good.
What incredible reach that you're getting there. I mean, you're not just affecting fathers. You're making a generational impact whenever you're opening up these lines of communication between families and children and their fathers and their daughters, and being able to look across and see another father going through the same thing. I think we as men, we want to know that we're not alone in this fight. We want to know that our brothers are doing the same thing and we're going through the same thing, but we also can get through it together. That community is so powerful, man. And I just want to commend you guys for what you're doing. Unbelievable work.
Well, thanks, Brian. And you guys know it does take someone to step out and do it, but it's also all the work that the Lord does through your hand as you open it up, and you start something and you have no idea, like, all right, Lord, I don't know, let's go for it. And then to see him take it places that you couldn't have imagined. I mean, literally is pretty, and maybe not, maybe if that's not the way he decides to take it, I think it's equally as exciting to, if with Family Lines for me, all I had was time on the water with my boys, that's a great win too. It's
amen.
It's not like it's got to look a specific way. It's just he, in whatever shape it takes, it's just, it's pretty amazing just to watch him work as our eyes are open to that and looking for where he's at and what he's doing.
Yeah. I loved that earlier when you were talking about the question you guys would ask, this defining moment. I love that question. I love that, John. And then you said something in some of our email exchange about finding yourself on the other side of the camera in this conversation. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned my late wife, Erin, passing away, and then finding myself in a spot as a single dad raising two teenage boys. And, I don't say this in an arrogant way at all. I think we always assume our life, I think, or often assume, or I'll speak specifically for myself. I assumed, Lord, we followed you into ministry. We're raising our boys the best we know how, but to follow you, and we're pressing into you. And then when she passed away, everything you kind of were tracking along, I mean, Family Lines, and it flips upside down. And now you're the other side of the camera, meaning in the past, I'd be the one to be in that. I mean, I had other parts of my past and journey that I would share that, but not such a dramatic shift as that, to where I'd be hearing guys share those kinds of things. And I'd be like, man, I can't imagine, tell me more about what that's like, and now all of a sudden the camera's turned around and I feel like, I don't know what to say right now. I don't have answers. I don't even know how to articulate what just happened. I'm still waiting for God to fill me in on that, the how and the why. But at some point you turn I had a counselor I was talking with through that season of loss and just kind of trying to get your mind or, or just your heart aligned again.
Right.
And he said, at some point you'll never answer the whys. Hows and whys can be, he called them hamster wheel questions. You'll turn them over and over. And we are not God. And he didn't say that in a trite, flippant kind of way,
Very gentle counselor way.
Yeah, exactly. And he had been there. He knew.
Oh, wow.
He had lost his wife 7 years prior to us meeting. And he said, they're hamster wheel questions. You just won't know. You just have to trust the sovereignty and the love of God. And you start asking, what now? What now, Lord? And so being able, when it was about a month after my late wife Erin passed away, I went on a 7-day Alaska trip that we had scheduled. It's actually the trip where we filmed Cycle Breakers and put out on Right Now Media here. The latest one you mentioned there, Brad. I didn't know at first, was I even going to go? But I thought, I don't know much about anything right now other than I know I don't want the enemy to steal what was a source of joy and ministry and life and disconnect from just taking fathers out. And I know I can row a boat, and I know I can love other dads and kids, and I can give that away right now. Yeah. And there's something about just being out, giving away when you're in a spot of need that keeps your heart alive. I feel like that was a big part of what I needed to do. And so did that, kept at that. And pretty soon God starts rehabilitating you, restoring, speaking to you. I love that passage in Romans where it reminds us that the Spirit intercedes for us where we can only groan, because that's some of it too. Just the grace of God becomes very real. And fast forward to now, and Julie and I, my wife Julie, I mean, I'm telling you guys, this is hard to share, and I think it's really hard to understand to guys that haven't been there. But boy, there's just no way, and it's not even fair, and it's not even realistic to compare the years in the marriage I had with Erin to the marriage I have with Julie, and even who they both were. But I just love, Julie is just amazing, and the way that God brought her into our lives, miraculous. I turned a corner from about a month before I met her, a little more, to where I wasn't feeling sad about the loss of my late wife, Erin, as much as I was thankful. I was just thankful for the years we had and the boys and the way God had rescued our heart and our marriage. And then there was a permission to dream and pray and know that the best years are still ahead, that there is more life and laughter and love. And he also made clear to me not to seek it out in a way like, don't try and find someone out of loneliness or neediness or anything like that, to let him be that one that occupied that space. But I was praying that he would bring, if and when he would bring someone that I could get to know her heart first. I wasn't interested in dating any of that whole game. The focus was the boys. And then he brings Julie, and we meet through ski coaching, volunteering ski coaches here in the community. She had lived in this community for a year, small community. We had never met, knew some of the same friends, went to visit some of the same places. and she's just amazing. And it just blows me away that the God's, really being able to do more than we can ask or imagine. I mean, it's incredible. And so that story now, and it's real time, Brad, it's just a different story on the other side of the camera now that I'm telling with my boys as well, and with Julie, and all of God's goodness and amazingness and everything that's over the top with Julie. There's still the struggles too, right? I mean, we're getting used to, she's never had kids, so hey, crash course, teenage boys, here we go. Surprise. And so we're in the house. She's like, man, I need where do I go for downtime anymore?
What's that smell?
Yeah, why does it stink so bad in this house?
But what is cool about that, she can handle the smell. She the Lord, I just seeing God bring, he holds our whole life, and we see things linear, like there's this day, then the next day, and the next day, and we plan that way. And then he looks at our life and he just sees what he sees. For I'm not saying he caused the loss of Aaron, but it didn't surprise him.
Right.
And he's not he's sovereign in that. He could have kept her here, and for the reasons he said, I'm bringing her home. What he did see, I believe, is Julie for myself and the boys in these years that we're living in now. And she doesn't know it yet. I remind her of it all the time. She's just living into it. And I tell her, babe, you've got everything. The Lord's given you exactly what the boys need. And these are the most defining years as young men for them.
Absolutely.
And to see her not just hang in there and battle through the smell and the lack of personal retreat space and all that in a loud, noisy house, but to know that we had a conversation the other night where I was just sitting back watching her counsel our 18-year-old son. He's asking for advice on some things, and she's given her perspective. And I thought, man, what a gift. Like I don't have this to give him as a father, and I've lived with him his whole life. And seeing her offer that and seeing how that shaped him and influenced his steps. And I just know more of that is ahead. And you walk hand in hand down through this new volume with the Lord. Not just, I've got a friend and a mentor that says it's not just a new chapter, it's a whole new volume. And Julie and I talk about it all the time. The best days are still ahead. And that's not a dismissal of the past or a dishonoring of the past. It's just that embracing of God's goodness and future, and celebration of those we've loved that are with him and healed and whole, as we all will be, and walking into his healing and his restoration and what he invites us to now in the in-between. And so, that's where we're at.
You said that God had brought you to a place of thankfulness before you met Julie. And I think I resonate with that, not thankful for the grief that you're going through or excuse me, or the events that led to that grief. Definitely not thankful for bad things happening at that time, but thankful that God is still in control, and you can look back and be grateful for the things that maybe you couldn't see while you're in the middle of that grief. Brad and I both have lost our fathers in the last couple of years, and just the terribleness of all that. But there gets to a point where you get a little bit more clarity, and you're able to see. And I'm very thankful that I had those last few years in close proximity with my dad, or I was able to eat lunch with him on the day that he died, and it's just those little moments of gratefulness that you can't see when you're in the darkness of that grief, but you can on the other side of it. And that's a place of hope. Like you're saying, the best is yet to come is not a dishonoring of the past, but it's a hope for the future that we as believers have. And, I love that. I love that where you guys are and where God has taken you as a family. Can you talk a little bit about this last this little phrase that you wrote to us? It says, "Fight absence, choose presence, and engage restoration." Can you speak to that a little bit? Because you made a comment earlier that I loved. You said your dad was not perfect, but he was there. And
Yeah.
I can resonate with that. My dad, he was not perfect, but he made some decisions in his life to be present in my life more than present at his job. And it was the quiet moments fishing on a pond week in and week out that built our relationship. It wasn't these moments of just proclamation of here's all of this advice, son, do this and that. But it was, I'm here, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Can you speak to those three things that you have there?
Yeah. I'd love to, because fight absence again. Come back to that phrase, Brad, you asked about being on the other side of the camera. There was a season for myself where I felt like, man, everything I used to hang my hat on is not arrogance, but confidence in fatherhood. Like, okay, I'm here, I'm engaged. I can have those intentional conversations with my boys. I feel like I know how to lead them.
Right.
And I feel strong in my leadership of them. And then I'm just completely disoriented. Like, I don't even know, where I'm going as a dad right now. So how am I supposed to lead the boys? And to be honest, there's still some of that. I feel like, well, I've never been with Julie and I, again, coming into this new volume, it's like, well, we've never been here before, boys. She's never been but we're there. And so when I say fight absence, it could mean the dad that's never been in a child's life, that needs to make time to be with their kids, to take their kids out and do something, or have some kind of interaction with them that they've never done, stretch themselves to do that. It could be a father figure because a biological dad just isn't there, and it's a grandfather or a mentor dad that can step in and fill that spot of presence. But it could be the dad that's there, he's just been emotionally absent. So there is the physical absence, but there's the emotional absence, and to fight against that. So for myself, it's been, okay, Jon, yeah, you may still be asking these questions for yourself, and here you're tasked with leading the boys. But go there with them, like fight the tendency to withdraw then until I figure it out, because that's something I feel like the enemy, who is, Jesus reminds us in John 10:10, you have an enemy and he's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And I offer you life to the full. And I think the enemy in isolation, he just does that to any of us, but especially men, because to admit that we don't know is weak to some in our eyes, right? It can feel weak. When the reality is none of us have it figured out. So I think it's actually the opposite. When you hear a dad offer that's strength, because he's confident enough to say that. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I got it all together, but I'm going to tell you what I do know, or I'm going to be here with you in this moment and have the courage to be here with you in this moment. When we host kids and dads or father figures, when I say fathers, as we're talking about family lines, I'm thinking father figures. Anybody that could be the biological dad, could be the grandfather, could be the mentor dad, the stepdad, whoever's there with that child. I always remind them, out of anywhere else you guys could be, you're here together. So let that speak, where maybe you fumble on words, you're not sure how to have these conversations. That fact speaks volumes. You're here, you're fighting absence. You moved everything around on your calendar to make this happen. Choosing presence is when you're in that moment, be present with them, because I can be there with my kids, but maybe there's something they've been wanting to share or say or hear, and it's not even on my radar because I'm just there for the activity. and you got to be careful there, right? I don't say that, Brian, as a dismissal of the value of shared activity, because I do believe that shared adventure, that shared experience builds relationship. Absolutely. But along within that, there's another layer, I believe, that we can get to with our kids if we're really present in that moment and we're intentional with our conversation and our time and our pursuit of them. Doesn't mean we have to give a half hour. Yeah, I mean, the lecture can do the most damage sometimes. Unless it's invited, I think it can be really good once it's invited. But maybe it's just me telling my kids what I love about them apart from performance. So for my son right now, he's a really good skier, Nordic skier, and he's got some races that he's doing around the Northwest, and he's hoping to go to the Midwest for a competition in the spring. And so there's that balance of pushing him. I'm proud of you. Good job. What was your time after the race? But at the end of the day, I want him to know skiing is not the biggest thing. And I love you because of who you are and the man that you are and the way that you are strong. You care for your brother. You love others. You're a great leader. You're a great son. You just make me so proud,
Did your dad tell you those things?
What was that, Brian?
I said, did your dad tell you those things?
He did. Yeah.
That's incredible. What a gift.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that, my dad didn't say those things just like that. I knew he loved me because he told me he loved me. But, those are the things that you're just saying right there are the things that I'm trying more and more to be intentional about with my children, because I didn't actually hear it articulated as well as you just did. One of the things that I think I fight as a father is feeling like my kids, they know it already, or they don't care about this story, or they don't want to hear this. When in reality, some of the times whenever I've connected most is a meaningless story I've told about a past experience, and they want to hear it 1,000 times because it's something that I'm sharing with them. They want me to share things with them.
Yeah.
In a loving and gentle way, and not necessarily all of it being, like you were just saying, lecture, but just communicating and not just being the stoic figure.
Yeah, that's really good, Brian. And I know you guys with this podcast, I mean, the stories we tell, you're absolutely right. I mean, and even those quote lectures, I think some of the most powerful times of teaching our kids come from when we're willing to share from our own story. And in fact, there's some exercises we'll do when we do some of our rod building workshops where we not only build the rod, but we leave some time for that relationship building conversation to come alongside the rod building conversation. And so one of the topics we take on is guidance, and we ask the kids to share with their dads what kind of guidance do they feel like they need from their dad in this season of life. What does that look like for them? What's helpful, what's not helpful? But then for the dads, share from your own story what was helpful for you when you were your kid's age. I mean, think back for me, when I was 18, what did I want from my dad for guidance? What did I appreciate that he gave? What did I feel like I wanted? And sharing that with my 18-year-old to connect with where he's at, I think it just reminds our kids, even if they're too young to connect it yet, I think it conditions them for, we're all God's children. And I remember holding my oldest son when he was first born and looking at him and thinking, man, Lord, this is your child that you've entrusted me to raise to know you in an earthly way, but to represent your love to him. But ultimately, he's your child. And in that way, not in a weird way, but in that eternal perspective way, my 18-year-old is a brother in Christ with me. And so I'm talking with a fellow man as well, not just my son. He'll always be my son. I'll always be his dad, but he's a fellow man. and he deserves, it's story to story connection. One man telling another. And when I was in my years in youth ministry, I always felt like, boy, the most significant youth minister was the one usually in their 60s to 80s is what I observed, because they were willing to share a ton of stories with the kids, and they really wanted to know, tell me more about your story, or why you feel the way you do. And they really just got into those kids' lives. And I feel like, I think in the church, I got to be careful here. I don't want to I know this is a broad generalization, but I feel like we have unintentionally edged out some of the demographic that's in the prime of their life for youth ministry. And that's when you're in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s. Man, by the time you're in your 90s, that's some of the most magical youth ministry you can do, because kids they love to hear the story, stories from your past. And especially when it comes to, this is where God's been, or this is where I saw him show up when I didn't think he was there. I mean, those kinds of stories are just powerful. And from parent to child, they're just as significant. Yeah.
Jon, I'd be really interested to, I always like to ask this question when we get in these kinds of conversations. Why is it that around the fire are some of the best conversations?
It's so true.
I really want to unlock and understand, like, what, in your opinion, why is that space such a good space for men to have conversation?
Yeah, you're right. It's universal. I don't know what it is about a flame, but there is something about just watching a fire burn that just captures your attention. And I don't know all the psychology or whatever goes into that, but it's really cool. That and eating meat around the fire. I mean, that's like two magical things coming together.
That's right.
But I know for what I've seen Brian be what I would call the perfect ingredients for guys getting together and sharing is, I think the thing about the fire is you're removed. Like it's dark around usually, right? If there's a fire, so there's not as much to distract you. You're all kind of brought around this common object. Like you're positioned to sit there and be together without those distractions. You're captured by God's creation, because I think there's something he's put, I don't know. I mean, I haven't studied this, but I just feel like, Lord, is there something? Like, I think about Jesus and the disciples, and I feel like, well, you guys lived out, and you lived in the unpredictable, and you followed Jesus to all kinds of crazy places. And there had to be a ton of fire that you're sitting around. And I don't know what God's put in us that just seems to be captured by fire. But his creation. And then there's that invitation to, again, be intentional. And I think when guys are challenged with that, not in a hokey way or a forced way, and I know we're really careful to remind dads, hey, we're all big kids here, so we're not gonna, these conversations, it's an invitation into conversation with your kids. And if we give you a question to talk about, it's, hey, if the shoe fits, wear it. Maybe it's a question that serves as a springboard to the question you really need to ask, or the thing you need to be talking about that we didn't even bring up. But I've just seen more often than not, I honestly cannot think of a time when a father refused to engage. Eventually, you'll get to the beginning of the trip, like we talked about before the podcast, where maybe someone stands there with crossed arms, which tells you, I don't know that I'm going here. I'm just going to kick back and observe, which is totally fine. All of us do it in different settings, and at least you're there. But boy, as soon as you start to hear another man remind you that you're not the only one, I think that's so key. When you hear someone share a part of their story, it does that of, wow, okay, they feel this way too, or they've had this question for God too. They're not this super Christian that I thought they were when I just saw them on Sunday morning, and that's all I knew them at,
Right.
And then the kids being told or reminded, we all have something to give and gain. That there's a reason where Jesus reminds us, if you don't become like little children, you won't inherit the kingdom. It's what is that an innocent child asks that a father needs to be challenged with by hearing and gaining from as well. And so when those young men or women are invited up into the company of adults that are there to care for them and love them too, I think that's a recipe for engagement. I really believe that. And even if most of what a particular man does is listen, it doesn't mean they're not being impacted, or a young man there or a young woman. Maybe that's just what they're there to do, or they've never known the kind of love that someone's sharing about. And so they're just blown away by the fact that someone can even speak that way about their kids, and that ministers to them or gives them hope or a picture of God's love. But they don't know they've never had that, so they don't know how to share that for themselves. You never know what's going on around that fire.
Yeah. That's good. Both Brian and I, one of the things that has brought us together has been fly fishing. And so that's something that we both, really love. And obviously the podcast is called The Storied Outdoors, and, how our stories in the outdoors, can be powerful and teach us an awful lot. What is it, in your opinion, about when you guys do these videos and these experiences? They're not in some classroom, but they're outside. Why is that setting so important?
I think, again, it's just being out where it's quiet and removed. It's not familiar. So even if you're guiding a trip, there's a little more familiarity than if you're coming as a participant, for the first time. There's just something really cool about being somewhere you've never been in that shared adventure. We're all going somewhere we've never been. But even as a guide, if you've been down a section of river, you've never been there with the people you're with. And so it's always new. So I think that common share, that brotherhood, that camaraderie, that common shared adventure is a big part of it. Being surrounded by God's creation. And then, the unpredictability. I feel like when everything in life is scripted and timed out for you, it's boring, right? I mean, it's comfortable, but it's boring. And maybe you don't know it's boring until you've been pushed outside of that, because all you've known is comfortable and pre-scripted. So I think and that can be all of us, right? We like our routines. I mean, even those of us that like adventure, you still like routine. I mean, there's something about rhythm and routine that's built into us as well, but we can slide into that, and we can slide into that with our kids, and we can slide into that with our marriages, the roommate season. And we have to, I think when we're forced to jog outside of that routine, that brings bonding as well. So when you're taking a group of, in this example, dads and kids out there, they're sharing that adventure for the first time together. They're in the company of others that are doing that too. They're outside of their routine, and there's that unpredictability. Oh, didn't see that coming. Okay, it's pouring down rain. Let's get all our gear in our dry bags and hunker down for the next hour till it blows over, or it's 15 degrees outside. My wading boots won't even fit. I got to go to the river to thaw them out, put them on, and oops, I melted it by the fire. And I mean, all those kinds of things they build story and funny memories and adventure. And I didn't see that coming kinds of things.
I mean, that is the DNA of what this podcast is about. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on here. And I wanted to brag on the video series too. I shared this with you guys, just how genuine it is. And it's not, earlier you said something about like hokey. It's not at all hokey to me. Like some Christian stuff can just be that. It can be hokey. It's not excellent, sometimes, and I just don't want to watch it. because it's not reality. But man, the first time I watched those series, I was like, my goodness, this is real. This is raw, it's genuine, and it's beautiful. Kudos to the guys shooting the footage because it's beautiful. But like you said, it's unexpected. You guys experienced all kind of stuff on those trips. There was one of my, I think it's in the promo, but I watched the whole series of the Cycle Breakers, and I think it's Aaron on a boat, and they're coming around this corner. He's like, he's saying, "Hey bear, hey bear,"
Yeah.
And then he comes around the corner, and there's a huge bear there.
Oh wow,
man! It is. There's genuine like surprise on his face, and so it's really, really good. It's fun to watch, and it's an adventure to watch. But the content's incredible. And I think you're right. That setting softens and opens up that exterior to be able to share, to build an engaged story. I think that unexpected, unscripted time is so beautiful, and then it brings out conversation and something. You're right, man. I truly believe there's something mesmerizing about a campfire, and we jokingly call it caveman TV all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
And you stare
best
at
TV
it.
out there.
And man, you get the guys begin to talk, and I love that, and all of that is captured very well in those series, and I've really, really enjoyed them. I can't recommend them enough. We'll have the link for them in the show notes, and man, I really hope people take advantage of the video series, but also, man, maybe there's some guys that need to come out on a trip with you guys.
Oh man, we'd love to host people. And just a couple of things, Brad. One, I mean, if there's anybody out there that would want to, they don't have to come on a trip if they're organizing one of their own, or they're wanting to just get a little bit of feedback on maybe what they can talk about out there with their guys. And some of those series are good for that too. Or we get a lot of phone calls, so I want to be careful here, but absolutely an invitation to email or call. We could share. We're open book as far as that goes, because man, I mean, that's the whole goal, is to encourage dads to fight absence and choose presence, and then to see that restoration for their family line is another big part of our mission, because when you do engage and you're intentional with your kids, and you walk with them through all the seasons of life, and you share the Lord's love with them, it will have an impact on future generations. And so my own dad, the conversations we've had have been some of the richest. And I'm in my 40s, he's in his 70s, and it's some of the best conversation, because now I've been a dad, and I can look back on him and think, wow, it took that so everything I thought he missed, I'm realizing, oh wait, no, he did it really well, actually. And I'm the games that he was at, the thing, he and mom both, the way they treated one another and related to each other in front of my sister and I, and all that stuff, you just take on a whole new appreciation. But he told me, he said, I wish I would have had these kinds of conversations with my dad. Mm-hmm. So he never had that. His dad was World War II veteran, very loving man, but just didn't talk a lot about his life, understandably so, saw a lot of death. My cousin and I would always want to hear war stories from Grandpa, and he'd always say, it's a part of my life I'd rather not talk about, and you really don't want to hear about. So that, he raised his dad with unconditional love. My grandfather met the Lord when he was in his 40s. So God transforms his heart. He gives dad what he has to give in that season. Mm-hmm. And then dad gives me what he has to give. And then I give my boys what what dad had passed on to me that I have to give. And there's this picture that Aaron Bryant and I, my buddy, coworker, talk a lot about, of standing on a picture of a child standing on a dad's shoulders so they can see farther, and my hope is for my boys, that they see farther than I did. And for my grandkids who have yet to be born, if that's what the Lord does in their lives. And those are happening now. Those are being shaped now, and we don't even realize that, but they really are. And for you, Brad, I just want to thank you for being, one, just the endorsement of the series. I mean, it's again, not to just endorse the series, but knowing this is coming from you, you gave a little shout out to help us in our fundraiser here this last winter to be able to tell more and more stories and invite more dads out. I will mention one of the big things we've done in our ministry. We have a pay what you can price on our expeditions. So like a Alaska trip or a steelhead fishing trip in Southeast Washington, and some of these things that are on our website. If price is ever an obstacle, we genuinely want to do and will do all we can to take care of that, so that the only obstacle standing in a dad's way is the calendar. I mean, that's really what we want to make happen. Awesome. But you being a facilitator with that Mending Line series, we've heard lots of good feedback from the series. We've also heard some feedback indicating people want more of a scripted out guide, like a Bible study guide kind of and I really, and we do put scripture in that facilitator guide, and we absolutely anchor it in God's word and his truth. Yeah. But as you mentioned, life is unscripted. It's not packaged up and handed to us. And so when we try and talk to someone like it's that way, it doesn't connect. And with a lot of guys, especially, I feel like we're seeing that I think we're in a process of regaining men back into the church and having to reevaluate, how are we really, I mean, ministry can be a title. How are we really ministering, though, to those men out there, those fathers and those families? And what can be scary as a facilitator with that Mending Line series is it's purposefully designed to be a catalyst to bring you into the lives of the men you're walking alongside of, that you want to bring into that room with you.
Right.
But it's not so scripted that because we don't know who those guys are that you're meeting with. We may never meet you. We have the privilege of doing that now, but just speaking in general of some of those facilitators out there, we want to invite them to engage each other's stories and do that with the kids, and the stories we've documented out there. We want those to serve as a springboard to you getting into your own story with the guys in that room. And what does that healing look like that God has for you and your kids, or the men you're walking with? And it's a lot more vulnerable to facilitate that kind of a conversation than one I've studied this, I know how to lead it, I know the answers, and I'm going to deliver that to my group kind of a study. So I really appreciate that in you, Brad, and just a fellow. I mean, you understand it, you're captured by it, and you go there with other men, which is really exciting. I mean, that's the big win right there.
Well, Jon, man, I think we could probably talk all day. You are our people, as Brad says, and man, just love this conversation. One of the things we like to do at the end of every podcast is to ask, what is your next adventure? So, what's on the horizon for you, or for Mending Lines, or for Family Lines, or for your family, your sons, you and your wife? What's the next adventure you are going on?
Well, you just wrapped up a lot of adventures right there.
All of those. Yeah.
For Mending Lines, we are filming a series this year in Montana, and we're actually turning the camera around, and it's going to be Aaron and I with our teenage boys. Aaron's got 5 kids, 2 of them are teenage boys. We haven't really documented teenage years yet. And some of what's it like to father through those teenage years. And we've never been little snapshots here and there in the series we've done, but we've never been on that side of the camera. And we feel like, there's value when you're asking other people to go there. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you're leading from that spot where you're going there yourself, and so we feel like it's a time to be vulnerable for our own families and fight that temptation to either let that feeling creep in that here's us as the experts helping you, or reminding other people that these guys are not experts, they're fellow dads. they've got something cool that God's done with the resources he's put in their hand, but that's all because of him and his fathering and how he's led us. And we're learning along the way with everybody else out there. Never been here before in fatherhood. Let's go there together. And so it's a chance to do that. Personally, for Julie and I mean, it's a whole new adventure. You know, we're just continuing to lean into loving the boys and loving one another. And we've got some exciting dreams that God's given Julie and I together that we're really pumped about chasing after. And it's just, she loves guiding. She's a really good fly fisher, by the way. So we're looking forward to hosting couples out there together for little, marriage getaways and little fly fishing, fly fishing. What's that?
I was like, okay, we'll come.
Yeah, come on out, Brian. Yeah, things like that. I mean, I'm really excited about this upcoming year. And there's, again, not void of challenges or question marks, but just really grateful for God's love and confident in his leading, and just got to keep leaning into him. And it feels good to be, feels great to be talking with you guys and knowing that's right where you're living too, and drawing encouragement and championing one another on to keep pressing in. So that's what we're after.
Jon, if people want to support Family Lines and know more about your work, how do they do that?
You can find us at familylines.org. So that would take you to our website, and from there you'll see the trips and the workshops, the documentaries, how to get involved in those things. And then there's a button to donate if you feel compelled to do that. And I know I don't have to tell you guys or probably any of the audience, but man, it's not just a phrase. We couldn't do it without you guys. And it's every time I'm out, and I don't just say this, every time I'm out in the field with a family, I have this picture of this huge team of people they'll never even meet that have made this moment happen for them. And it's humbling, and it's one of the greatest joys. And so, and if you're ever in North Central Washington or you're looking to come out, we also have a fly fishing academy that we started 2 years ago. It's still part of Family Lines ministry, but it's got a separate website, and it's familyflyfishing.com. Mm-hmm. And it's or familylinesflyfishing.com. And it's a fun time to just learn more about fly fishing. We got a couple ponds stocked with some trout, and they're big, and kids love catching them. And it's fun to host families out there too.
Oh man. Yeah, I saw earlier this year or late last year, I guess, close to the end of the season, you guys had people come out to catch a bunch of those. I think you're trying to maybe kind of getting ready for a restock and going to clean some out.
Yeah.
Like, boy, I wish I lived close. That would be a lot of fun to go over there and rake in some fish. That'd be fun.
What's funny about that, real quick, that with otters, there's 4 otters that'll come into the pond and kill all the trout every year, every winter. So we were tearing our hair out for a number of years thinking, how do we keep these otters out? And it dawned on us last year, well, let's let all the kids come and fish them out and take them home. So that's what that is come get the fish before the otters get them.
I love it.
Hey, let's a little bonus question for our fly fishing guys that listen. Jon, what's one of your favorite flies to tie?
Oh boy, intruder style flies. So getting into swinging for steelhead.
Wow, something I've never done, but hope to do.
Yeah, well, again, Brad, if you want to come out, well, it's getting harder to find, but there are still some spots out here. Yeah. We can get you on some open water, but it's, swinging flies for steelhead. I feel like there's just no greater joy there, or just swinging flies, period. But yeah, an intruder style fly is one that I really enjoy tying just because it involves quite a few things. I find that the more you guide, the more you buy, because you just don't have time to tie as much. But those intruders are they're worth taking time for, in my opinion. They're just fun to tie.
That's awesome. I'm just now learning how to tie flies, and a buddy of mine was helping me learn how to tie some saltwater patterns for down here on the Gulf Coast to go after redfish.
Now that's something I've never done, so we'll have to trade.
Man. Come on down, We'll trade out.
that'd be awesome.
Well, thank you, man. Again, thank you so much for taking time to join us and share this story. We always say we hope these stories encourage people and challenge people. I'm sure there's someone who needs to listen to this. I know there's some dads that listen to this that will be blessed by this conversation and encouraged to have these conversations with their sons. And I hope some people do tune in to the Family Line series. There's a couple places to access that, but I think we'll have them go through you guys' website, familylines.org, and I'll have that on the show notes for people to be able to find that. But one of the things that we love that people do share this, and so we hope you share this story. We're blessed by just a few listeners, and they're faithful listeners, and they'll share this story. And if you want to help grow the podcast, you leave us a review on iTunes or your podcasting platform. And we hope this encourages you and challenges you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.